Let's continue this conversation. I want to introduce John Exo. He's a Water Quality Programs Coordinator for the Division of Extension here on UW-Madison campus. He is going to share Extension's contributions to trying to improve water quality. As you can kind of tell, the theme is collaboration. So come on up, John, and let's see your desk.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Pam. And I really want to say thank you to Paul Mitchell and Jeremy for inviting me and doing such a great job of organizing today's event. It's as somebody who's involved in organizing these sorts of things over many years, it's really recognizable when an event like this is really well organized. So thank you all very much. And so I see my presentation here today as kind of a transition between the folks, the academics, and the people that are really focusing on important data and research, and the subsequent panel this afternoon. So I think I've got the right one here. And if I put my reading glasses on. How's that? Okay. All right. So again, I'm John Exo, and I'm kind of in a transition today, and so it's unusual to be speaking to an audience that includes both your past immediate supervisor and your current immediate supervisor. So it's kind of an interesting atmosphere. I've been working in agriculture and water quality for most of my career. I started out working for Sauk County and worked for Dane County as well in terms of agriculture and water quality related issues. Grew up just west of Madison here, about 20 miles between Verona and Mount Horeb. Worked on a couple of different dairy farms, and that really helped me with a foundation of understanding of what it's like to be involved in agriculture production. So those foundations really have provided a lot of important foundation for me in understanding how to deliver a product that's quality for our audiences and integrating all manner of things across expertise, both on campus, from our partners, and also from producers. So it's really a fortunate position to be in. So I'm going to talk about a number of points today. The first I want to talk about is what do we feel is really driving the demand for the increased demand for agricultural and water quality related education and outreach. And that's something that we focus on every day. What is driving that demand? And what has changed in the farmer engagement landscape? That's part of that driver. There's a lot of things happening in agriculture that are really dynamic right now that influence how we in Extension look at that equation. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that today. And in fact, of course, how are we responding to that? Those increase in demand and those drivers that are behind that demand, how are we responding to it? And that's really the foundation of my presentation today. And then, of course, what are some of the outcomes that we're actually pursuing as part of that outreach? We don't just do outreach for its sake. We really want to focus on the outcomes from those things. And those are the sorts of things we integrate in conversations with colleagues and partners across Wisconsin. What are the outcomes we're really pursuing? And then finally, what's some examples that illustrate this work? And some of this will be also touching on the foundation laid over 20 years by Discovery Farms. So a couple of things I'd like to ask you to ponder, and maybe this will prompt some questions at the end for our panel, or maybe questions for me or the other panelists here. What kinds of agriculture or water quality education needs do you hear or do you perceive? And I'm sure you hear them every day in your interactions with people. And then what do you think is fundamentally driving those questions and that demand? I'm really interested, and these are questions that we ask our partners and our clients regularly, and I'm interested in hearing that from you sometime over the course of today. So here's our perspective. Here's some of our perspectives on those questions, on what's driving this demand. The first is that there is an obvious increased and broad societal awareness about the connections between agriculture and water quality. And I kind of liken this to the decades-long increase in awareness about something like invasive species. A few decades ago, it was really among scientists that was an important issue. Some landowners were starting to become aware of it. People were involved in doing ecological restoration. It's the same kind of thing now in society with agriculture and water quality. And it isn't just because more people are having their well water tested. It's because it's visible, and also because it's part of broader awareness in society that we have challenges. And that pressure from broader society is being felt by farmers. At the same time, it's being felt by farmers. It's maybe perceived both as a risk and an opportunity for farmers. So if you think about squeezing a balloon, there's a bulge somewhere, and that bulge could be interpreted as leadership that then results from that awareness and that pressure felt by farmers. So another factor is farmer leadership. And we're hearing that from leaders demanding more information and a better product, more effectively coming from Extension and the university. And then certainly, as Dr. Kacharik pointed out, there's lots of questions and lots of evidence that climate change is driving some of this demand for more information and solutions that farmers can adopt on their farms to mitigate some of those impacts. And then there's obviously consensus within agricultural organizations, including the Ag Coalition, but a broad array of organizations. We're hearing this from everywhere, from individual farmers all the way up to organized groups that really recognize that this demand is out there. It's coming from everywhere from farmers to general society. So these are some of the things that are driving our thinking about our responses. And as I said, and Matt alluded to, we're not starting from a basis of zero. There are lots of functions in UW and in Extension that have been working on these issues for many years. So it's not like this new agricultural water quality problem is starting from ground zero. And one of the reasons it's not is because of the work that Discovery Farms has done over 20 years in response to a couple of needs. The needs for farmer leadership in water quality and driving the question and some of the research that results from those questions, but also the role of agriculture more broadly in water quality. Again, evidence of leadership and the way that UW has been responding to that. But there are other examples which I'll talk about later of organizations and entities in UW and Extension that have been responding for some time. So let's talk a little bit about the changes in the farmer engagement landscape. What is new or newer that's really part of this equation? What are we trying to respond to? The one is obviously farmer-led watershed councils, and that is a place where there's all manner of conversation happening among farmers and in many cases among other diverse stakeholders beyond agriculture that's driving this, and it's a new change on the landscape that we have to respond to and be a part of. And of course, there's emerging leaders through that process, but elsewhere as well. There's a lot of leadership happening in Yahara Pride and the Farmers for Mill Creek and all manner of organizations around the state, from farmer-led organizations to farmer networks and others that are creating leaders, and those leaders are coming to us asking for a response. And then the other really big one here is the concept of soil health as a unifying concept. And part of this is being driven by farmers, a lot of it, and a lot of this is being driven by our agency and other partners. It's really a unifying concept that people can see as having potential benefits for water quality, and that's really a big part of the driver. And that's a unifying concept all over the landscape in a whole range of production systems. So in terms of some of that changing engagement landscape, 20 years ago or so, you might have thought this was a weedy cornfield. And 20 years ago, maybe the on-farm outreach events were mostly led and driven by agencies and organizations. And that has almost been flipped on its head right now. So you see a field here where you have an interseeded cover crop, and the conversation is expanded to all manner of topics related to water quality, crop production, other aspects of importance to farmers. And then the farmers themselves are driving these conversations And that has provided a tremendous opportunity for us to respond and incorporate science about the connections between those opportunities and those practices and water quality in that environment of engagement. So here's a great map, and you don't need to be able to read the words on the right-hand side, but it just sort of is evidence that there's now on the landscape in the last 5 to 7 years, there are at least 30 plus farmer-led organizations driven by the DATCAP farmer-led grant program, and they're as diverse as the farming systems and the landscapes. And so here is fertile ground, if you will, for engagement around this conversation about agriculture and water quality, and it's a very fertile ground. And then, of course, our partners at NRCS have initiatives also where farmers are leading the questions and driving the conversation about the practices they want to evaluate on the land and expand adoption of among their peers across the landscape. So NRCS has a number of different networks, farmer demonstration networks in East Central Wisconsin, focusing on the Lake Michigan watershed. And this is another great model for engaging producers in the conversation, and it's a forum for us to be plugged into those conversations among farmers, agronomists, lakefront property owners, and all manner of people that have a stake in improved water quality. So what are the kinds of questions that we're getting in these settings? Well, if you're an agronomist, you can probably list 50 questions. But questions like, what is this practice doing for compaction on my farm? What is it doing for the infiltration of water during a rain event? How does it impact yield? How does it impact soil erosion? But one of the most important ones that we're hearing in that setting around the tables is, how is this practice impacting water quality in my watershed? In my watershed. Okay, and this is an opportunity for us to respond to that question, because farmers are asking for metrics about all kinds of things like nitrogen use efficiency to how is this impacting water quality or groundwater, if you will, in my watershed. And this is a great opportunity for us to be able to respond to that. And part of the reason why the Ag Water Quality Program was created. So what are some of the roles for our program going to be going forward? Well, one obviously is going to build from the experience and the wealth of data collected from 20 or so years of on-farm monitoring by Discovery Farms. That is a foundation that's invaluable. Why? Because farmers believe that information. It's collected on farms. The decisions about how those projects are implemented are driven by farmers and others. And so that's a great foundation for our work in this area and our ability to expand outreach and education and the reach or the impact from that work of 20 years. And then, of course, we're responding to this demand for more outreach that I've been talking about. And obviously, we're integrating UW expertise from all across campuses, from Extension and beyond Extension, from the Nelson Institute and all the departments here at UW-Madison and at Stevens Point, River Falls, Milwaukee and Green Bay, to integrate all this expertise into a product that's quality for our audiences. We're really focused on delivering a quality product. And we're responding to the insights of farmers through the insights of the Ag Coalition, individual farmers, and all manner of organizations and individuals, professionals that are serving farmers. And of course, because of FY22 budget appropriation, we'll be expanding and adding a few positions here in the coming year to really meet that demand. Right now, our capacity is limited, but our product is in part to expand that ability to do outreach in complement with Discovery Farms, in complement with researchers and others that were integrated into this program. So we have many willing and able collaborators here at UW, and we like to say that we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just reinventing the process of inventing the wheel, and it's completely different. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but in a sense, we really see our program as not a substitute for any other entity working in this area, but another place to integrate expertise with a specific intent of focusing on this relationship between agriculture production and their practices and water quality outcomes, and that's really our niche. So obviously we're integrating faculty expertise, extension specialists and others, the nutrient and pest management program, folks from the Dairy Innovation Hub that Dean Vandenbosch talked about. There's some fabulous hires there, and other campus expertise. So what are some of the goals and outcomes that we're initially going to be focusing on? And we're working on refining these now. But generally speaking, one of our goals is to help farmers be successful minimizing their water quality impacts. And there again, we're responding to that demand that we're hearing directly from producers and those that serve producers. And we want to customize information in our outreach program for a range of production systems. Dr. Kucharek talked about the diversity of agriculture in Wisconsin, and that makes our job complex, and yet we want to rise to that challenge and make sure that we're responding with information that's customized for as many production systems as we can, and we'll be able to do that as our capacity expands over time with staff. And then we want to communicate consistently for a quality product. So one of our goals is to integrate as much expertise and then develop consistent messages that producers hear and minimize the amount of conflicting information that they might hear in regards to the impacts of various practices on water quality. We really want to drive a quality product in part with consistent messaging, and that's one of our initial goals for our program. So some initial focus and specific things that we're working on is just as examples of what we're focusing on in terms of content and other things in our program right now. We want to be able to convey the relative impacts of various practices on soil, on phosphorus, nutrients, and other pollutants. Dr. Kucharek talked a lot about that, being able to convey the actual impacts. He had a great slide that showed those relative reductions in nitrogen losses from various practices. We want to be able to build from that type of information. And then we want to also work on communicating the trade-offs associated with certain soil health practices. Soil health is a unifying concept I talked about, but it isn't always universally beneficial for water quality. And we want to be able to simplify and create that distinction for where those areas may not always have positive impacts. And how can those be mitigated? So how can we stack practices upon each other and be able to communicate the types of practices that will ultimately strike that balance in reducing those trade-offs associated with soil health practices. And then we want to elevate and expand education associated with Discovery Farms. Discovery Farms' capacity over time to do outreach and education has ebbed and flowed with its staff capacity. And right now our program, the Agricultural Water Quality Program, is a complement to Discovery Farms. And in the sense that we want to be able to expand the reach of Discovery Farms' work through our outreach and education. And so we're integrating ourselves entirely with Discovery Farms and the outreach that they do as a result of their projects. And then when our capacity is growing, we want to be able to initiate some applied research on farms with producers. And that will obviously be done in a model with, or in fact, by Discovery Farms itself. And the way to think about this is that the Discovery Farms program is part and parcel. It's embedded within our agricultural water quality program. And so that makes it easy for us to integrate ourselves together and finding the best complement of research and on-farm demonstration with outreach and ability to expand the communication and reach to our audiences. So there's currently, example of this, there's currently 4 Discovery Farms projects where we partner with counties. And this has been a new emphasis for Discovery Farms for some time now, where we're using partner resources to do some of the work and leverage our resources with county ability and county locations and locations where our projects happen. And 3 of those projects are edge of field monitoring, and the new one in Pepin County is starting work to quantify leaching of nitrogen from a dairy system that's going to be evaluating cover crops on a silage system in Pepin County. So these slides is a little bit, there's some overlap in these two slides, but from 2018 to 2022, there are fewer projects, but there are more projects that incorporate those partner relationships with counties and others. And these projects are just as important from an outreach standpoint as the traditional projects that were conducted in the initial years of Discovery Farms. So in summary, our program was created to respond to the increase in demand. That's the basic premise of our program. There's more demand out there. We want to be able to respond to that demand, and the premise of our program is it's responding to the increased quantity and quality of demand for outreach related to agriculture and water quality. And the second premise is that this landscape of farmer engagement is changing, and we have to be able to respond to that, be in that place, be in that environment where farmers are interacting in real time, asking questions about the impacts of these various practices on water quality. And we want to be able to be there, but we can't be there in all places. And there are many other partners, organizations, counties, agronomists, Department of Ag, Trade Consumer Protection, and others that are there in those spaces. And we want to be there to respond with the science related to these connections. And that's really our niche in that space. And then finally, again, we're focused intently on helping farmers be successful in minimizing their positive impacts, or maximizing their positive impacts on water quality related to their production practices. So with that, I'll just say thank you, and I think we're going to start with the panel now, so I'll just stay here. Yeah, thank you very much.